Class is in session. I am your host, Matt Hicks, the FF Educator, joined as always by my co-host, John Lobb, the Gridiron Scholar, back at it again with another college fantasy football season preview. This time we're breaking down our top 24 wide receivers. This episode, as always, brought to you by the Rookie Big Board. If you want to get more insight on Devy, Dynasty, college fantasy football, get some personalized access, chop it up in the Discord with me and John, you can head on over to patreon.com/theFFeducator. It's just $3 a month. John, top 24 wide receivers. This is a jam-packed position. It's July. For me, that is CFF peak season, right? I'm doing best ball drafts. I'm doing a lot of drafting. I'm sure you feel the same way. Are you just as fired up as I am?
I am. It's July 4th today, and in the last 10 days, Matt, I've probably watched as much film of wide receivers. Now, it's not like the draft season. There's more film. There's more in-depth stuff you can watch, but some of these are young college players. I've watched them at length, done all my research. I'm going to have this week my profiles published on Fantrax, so I'm ready to talk about our top 25 or top 24 for our viewers.
All right, we will have some bonus ones, as always, sleepers at the end, so we'll go above 24, just jumping the gun a little bit. All right, let's start here with our 24 through 19. It starts at 24 with Raheem Jarrett out of Maryland, Zachary Franklin out of UTSA coming in at 23. Number 22 is Parker Washington from the Penn State Nittany Lions. 21, Puka Nacua out of BYU. Number 20, Stephon Cobbs out of Boise State. And number 19, rounding out our first group here, John, is Dontavian Wicks out of Virginia. It's an interesting group, John. You know, I like to pick up on trends. And for me, we're projecting forward. We're projecting a step forward for a lot of wide receivers in this group, but stepping into offenses that certainly justify that projection. So who jumps out to you here? Where do you want to start with this first group?
First, I'm going to talk about Raheem Jarrett because there's a lot of discussion about the Maryland wide receiver core. You have Jacob Copeland, the transfer from Miami, Dante Demas, who was injured, and there's no questioning Dante Demas's abilities. I don't question that, but he did get injured last year, and he was not on the field in the spring game practices. And then there's Raheem Jarrett. And what I try to tell everyone, yes, Matt, I'm bullish on the 4-star recruit. I think he's got tremendous talent, NFL size. He's a 5-star.
5-star.
Okay, so, you know, he has what you're looking for. I believe if he was at Ohio State or at Alabama, I think he would be way up Devy boards, way up rankings, everything. Now, he surprisingly chose the Terrapins. He has not been great, but that's because of expectations. You're a 5-star recruit at Maryland. They expect you to come on the field and basically be an All-American from day one. That's not how life works sometimes for young men. When Demas got hurt last year, Jarrett played much better football. He started to show, to me, the skills that were there in high school, Matt. I felt like, okay, he's finally blossoming, finally becoming the player that I think he can become. So why do I say all this? They have 4 returning offensive linemen. Tagovailoa is coming back at quarterback, and I believe he's got over 20 career starts right now. Maryland's going to have a soft schedule early. And then afterwards, Maryland's going to be the underdog in a lot of games, Matt. Why is that interesting to me? Well, the Terrapins, they're going to throw the ball in the second half of the games. Will he be up and down? Yeah, I would think Jarrett will be up and down. But at the end of the year, Matt, I think he's going to get 1,000 yards receiving and nearly double-digit touchdowns. I want to talk about this because it's also about value, Matt. You and I have him at 24. Viewers, you don't have to draft him as a 24th wide receiver off the board.
Yeah, he's going lower.
He's going to sit there. I've got him in the 11th round. There's drafts where I'm like, I'm going to see if Jarrett, where he goes. And then all of a sudden it's round 11. I'm like, okay, just stop being silly. I can't let him fall anymore. So I take him. I have 4 shares out of 7 drafts. I like this Maryland passing game. So we both like Jarrett, everyone. You don't have to take him in the 5th round. You can wait. The other player that I've fallen in love with over this process, Puka Nacua. Matt, he went to Washington. I was looking up his profile at 24/7 Sports, and sometimes I forget how good these young men were in high school because he played 2 seasons at Washington, and now he's had 1 full season at BYU. In 2018, he was the Polynesian Bowl Player of the Year, Utah Gatorade Football Player of the Year, All Utah Offensive Player of the Year. I could keep going on and on, Matt. He ended up as the Utah career leader in receptions with 260, 5,226 yards, and 58 touchdowns in high school. Goes up north to Washington. When he arrives, Washington's on the downfall, Matt. These Huskies have not been the Huskies that we've known for 2 decades.
Look more like the Yukon Huskies.
It's bad, right? So what does the young man do? He transfers to BYU. Matt, last year, he ended up with 43 catches, 805 yards, and 6 touchdowns. He's 6'2", 205 pounds. Matt, he has NFL size. He has the talent. And why I like him more, everyone's starting to talk about Jaren Hall. He's getting media attention as an NFL prospect. And I like Hall. I'm not as high as some folks on him, but I do like Hall. Well, if Hall's going to throw 32 touchdowns, Puka is the best receiver on the team. I'm probably looking at double-digit touchdowns and at least a career best in receiving yards. So the more I studied and watched some film on both him and Hall, I really like this young man. I like all of them in this group, Matt. Who do you like?
Yeah, 2 guys, John, really jump out to me out of this group, right? And it's kind of those guys that we're projecting to step forward in their offenses. So starting here with Parker Washington out of Penn State, you look at a guy who last year he caught 64 balls. So certainly, we already have a foundation for him to be a big piece of this Penn State offense, but 91 vacated targets there, John, with Jahan Dotson. Penn State, in the Sean Clifford era, I mean, think of KJ Hamler, right? Think of Jahan Dotson. They key in on one guy and they make him a big deal, right? And Parker Washington is set and primed to be that guy. I believe Washington was a high 4-star recruit, so there was a lot of hype coming out early for him, and he's lived up to that. So the key with Parker Washington, will he get the touchdowns, right? Because Jahan Dotson had 12 of them. He averaged 1 per game last year. Who is Sean Clifford going to throw the ball to in the red zone? I think it's going to be Parker Washington, right? I think he's going to have that field stretching ability this year. And you mentioned it here. I know the name Sean Clifford makes everybody cringe, but Penn State's going to throw the ball a lot. We talked about in our running back episode. I think Nicholas Singleton gets some action, but they're going to want to throw the ball. They're not going to want to put it all on their freshman running back, right? In a similar sense, Stephon Cobbs out of Boise State. John, I almost wish we weren't talking about him because I'm frustrated folks have picked up on him. I thought I was ahead of the curve with Stephon Cobbs because I've been watching, my guy in this year's past draft class was Khalil Shakur. And I love Khalil Shakur, but towards the end of the season, I started noticing somebody else popping up off the screen, right? Who is this number 5? It is Cobbs, Stephon Cobbs. We're going to talk about a different Cobbs later on, but Stephon Cobbs out of Boise, 34 receptions and 5 touchdowns last year, 77 vacated receptions here going with Khalil Shakur gone. So Stephon Cobbs is going to be the guy in the offense. They're returning their quarterback, there's stability there, so we can expect Cobbs to just step right up into that offense. John, let's go ahead and jump into 18 through 13 here, starting with Zay Flowers, the wide receiver out of Boston College, Jaden Reed, the wide receiver out of Michigan State, Dante Cephas out of, is it Fresno State? Kent State, right?
Oh, no, I screwed up. Kent State.
Kent State. All right. For those listening to the audio, John had me questioning myself for a second.
No,
here.
my fault.
Dante Cephas coming out of Kent State, Marvin Mims out of Oklahoma, Rashee Rice out of SMU, Coming in at number 14 and number 13, Marvin Harrison Jr. out of Ohio State. John, I know which guy jumps out to me out of this group because I feel like I have a 75% plus exposure to them, but I'm going to let you go ahead and start with your guy out of this group.
Everyone who follows me on Twitter or has listened to other podcasts, I'm big on Zay Flowers, so I'm not going to go too much on Flowers here. Check me out on the ITL podcast, anything I've done on Chasing the Natty. I've talked about Zay Flowers. I'm going to talk about Jaden Reed, who I've not really discussed much this off season. Michigan State was a run-based game last year team with Kenneth Walker. But if you watched Michigan State, because I was scouting Kenneth Walker and I'm a Michigan fan and a Big Ten fan, one player that had a much better season I think anyone gives him credit for is Jaden Reed. Matt, he finished 29th in the country in PPR scoring formats amongst wide receivers. I mean,
in a broken offense, right?
Yes.
A broken passing game, at least, I should say.
Yes. And in a run-based, broken passing game, he popped at times. The numbers, 59 receptions, 1,026 yards. Matt, he averaged 17.4 yards a reception. Ridiculous. He is a big play threat. He had 10 touchdowns. He was an every week starter. Most college fantasy football lineups require 3 starters, so you're looking at 36 wide receivers. When you add flex positions, Jaden Reed is beyond a doubt a weekly starter in college fantasy football. He has his quarterback returning. We think the running game will be good again, but without Kenneth Walker, Matt, what if it's not as good? Well, what are you going to do? You have Thorne at quarterback. You have Jaden Reed at wide receiver. They're probably going to throw the football more often. Absolutely love him there. And Matt, no one's talking about him. He kind of slips under the radar. I mean, there are people who love him, but when you listen to as many podcasts, as many people, he's not one of those guys who are brought up as often as you would think. And he has an outside NFL prospect file. You know, if he put up like 1,200 yards, which I don't necessarily think will happen, but if he did, he would end up increasing his draft stock. So there's motivation for the young man to be even better this year. And then Dante Cephas. I should have put Kent State. Matt, it's always about the MAC. We love the MAC in college fantasy football.
We love the MAC. This is a pro-Maction podcast.
Pro-Maction. The thing about Cephas and Kent State, they again have a brutal opening schedule. Kent State, Matt, goes for the money. They take the big-time money. Last year, they played Texas A&M and Texas A&M. And Kent State, again, has a very challenging schedule the first month. So you've got to be patient with Kent State fantasy players. And hopefully you can, come out 3-1, 2-2, right? And then you get the Kent State goodness. Cephas will still score points because they'll probably be playing from behind. So you get some fourth quarter action, but he's probably not going to dominate like he did in the MAC. Matt, last year, 82 receptions, 1,248 yards, 9 touchdowns. He is a very good wide receiver. He also has NFL size. I want to make sure I get the right size here. Let me see. Here he is. He is 6'3", 218, Matt. And in the MAC, they just do not have defensive backs to deal with the player 6'3", 218 on a weekly basis. Love Dante Cephas. Matt, who are you liking in this group?
Let's talk about Rashee Rice out of SMU. You should have known I was going to talk about the ponies when you gave me the chance here. Rashee Rice in 2021 comes in with 64 receptions, 9 touchdowns, 670 yards. Now, John, my first 2 guys I talked about with Cobbs and Washington, right? The guys ahead of them left for the NFL. But here's the thing about Rashee Rice. He led the team in receiving last year, and yet still Reggie Roberson, number 2 on the team, off to the NFL. Danny Gray, number 3 on the team in receiving last year, off to the NFL. Grant Calcaterra, number 4 on the team in receiving last year, off to the NFL. And John, if you really want to get cute with it, number 5 in receiving on their team was Ulysses Bennett, the running back, who's now playing at Mississippi. So I understand we have a coaching change here. I don't think they're going to tame the offense, pun intended, too far there, right? I think they're still going to air it out. You still have Tanner Mordecai, who was a very successful passer last year, threw the ball nearly 500 times. And certainly there will be other talented wide receivers there for SMU, but Rashee Rice is going to lead the way. I'm very excited about what he's going to do in this offense, John, just like I'm very excited about jumping into our top 12 guys here. Number 12 is Kayshon Boutte out of LSU. Number 11 is Quentin Johnston out of TCU. Jalen Cropper, number 10, out of Fresno State. Jermaine Burton out of Georgia, number 9. Miles Price out of Texas Tech, number 8. And Josh Downs out of UNC, number 7. Now, John, we have a variety of listeners, right? We know that for the college big board show here. Some folks are Devy heavy. Some folks are CFF heavy. Some folks are just kind of feeling out this whole landscape. I think this is where it gets tough in CFF, because you start really recognizing these names for their Devy and NFL draft value. And sometimes it's difficult to parse out their CFF value, right, from their Devy value, from their overall talent. And with names like Boutte and Johnston, Burton, and Downs, right, I'm really interested in your thoughts on how these guys mash up that value with their actual 2022 CFF seasonal value.
It's fascinating because when you get into the top 12, I would say all of the players are Devy ranked, and there's film on them. NFL media has been talking about them over the summer. You know, Jordan Reed at ESPN, Daniel Jeremiah and an NFL Network. You know, our friend Brandon Lejeune is doing breakdowns on his shows for Devy prospects. CFF is a little bit different, folks. Dante Cephas is an incredible college fantasy football player. He's not on the radar yet. In this group, you have 2 players who I'll just reference who are not yet on NFL radar but are huge college. Jalen Cropper, Fresno State. Matt, if you're looking for a player with a very high floor, with a good ceiling, he's the type of player who you want to draft. He's so consistent in that Bulldogs offense with Jake Haener coming back. And Haener and Cropper are both 2 players that want to improve their draft stock. They want to get on the radar, and they would love to be day 2, but they'll at least round 4 draft picks. Now they could get to day 2, but right now you're looking at round 5, round 4 value. Very interested in them from college fantasy football. And Cropper is one of those guys, when he's there in the 3rd round, I very much love him. The other one's about system. Miles Price.
Mm-hmm.
Cliff Kingsbury. And then before that, our guy at Mississippi.
Leach. Yeah.
They propelled Texas Tech into that wide open air raid. They brought in Zach Kitley. Why is that important? He was the guy who coordinated the Western Kentucky offense last year with Jared Stearns and Bailey. Right now, he's at Texas Tech. What we do know from his time at Houston Baptist and now at Western Kentucky, they're going to throw the ball, Matt. They're going to throw the ball and throw the ball. He's probably in the Mike Leach category. Like, I'm going to throw the ball almost 70% of the time. Well, when you look at the depth chart at Texas Tech, Miles Price, to me, is the one who pops based on pedigree, what the 24/7 had him ranked, and how we look at him. Let me get to his profile here for 1 second. I want to make sure. I believe he was a 4-star recruit. He's 5'10", 180. He's very versatile. What?
Yeah, he should be a 4-star.
Yeah, he was a very versatile high school. He had 1,600 yards rushing, 2,278 receiving. He has popped. This is what I like from last year, Matt, doing the research. He had 9 catches of 20 yards, 6 catches of 30 yards, and 3 receptions of 40 yards or longer. Miles Price might eat in that Zach Kittley offense, Matt. And he's the guy, if you're looking for Jarrett Stearns or Mitchell Tinsley Gold, when the Red Raiders are just throwing the ball 45 to 50 times every week, Miles Price is the player that you want. Now, there will probably be another Red Raider too that pops, but they're lower on our rankings, and we don't know for sure yet. That's something we're going to be watching in training camp. One other player that I just want to talk about because the value's too good. The last 2 drafts I've done, Matt, Kayshon Boutte has fallen to me at 312 and 4.5. My friends, that's a steal. You cannot let Kayshon Boutte fall past the 3rd round. Here's the story. In the spring, he had second surgery on his ankle, and he missed, I think, the last 7 games last year, Matt. 6 or 7 games, he was hurt. He is a great player. I'm not sure if he's in the Odell, Jamar Chase yet.
Are you going to give him the stat? Are you going to give him the best stat of the 2021 college football season?
What was that? Tell me the great stat.
Kayshon Boutte played in 6 games, 6 games total, and he led LSU in receiving.
I mean,
from those 6 games.
That's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And then Brian Kelly criticized Boutte publicly. His draft stock plummeted. Since that time, read Brian Kelly, everyone. He's changed his perspective, and he's starting to talk more positively. And it looks like he's going to be on the field first day of training camp. My friends, if you've been watching Brian Kelly as long as I have, from Cincinnati to Notre Dame, he peppers his alpha receiver, Will Fuller. Remember him at Notre Dame? 1st round draft pick. Peppered him. Equinemius St. Brown. Whoops, there's our dog. Sorry, everyone. Equinemius St. Brown. Peppered with targets. That's what Brian Kelly does. Boutte is the best receiver on LSU. Get him now at value. Matt, I'm coming out on the rookie big board with my updated Devy rankings. I had to move him back up. I think right now, reading the tea leaves, Brian Kelly and Boutte are going to be unbelievable. And here's the caveat. I dare anyone to name 3 quarterbacks from Brian Kelly's offense. Here's the thing, folks. His quarterbacks get the ball to his receivers. Don't give me that LSU doesn't have a good quarterback. It doesn't matter. Look at Brian Kelly's coaching history. The receiver flourishes despite the quarterback. I remember Matt and I broke down Ian Book, and we said, no. Ian Book is not the guy. And anyone who saw that game, he played for the Saints last year, that was just a disaster. And all the way back, Brian Kelly's quarterbacks, Matt, don't succeed in the NFL. But his receivers get drafted with high capital. And I'm going to go out on a limb. Boutte might be the best receiver Kelly's ever coached.
Yeah, I believe that, John. Let's go ahead and jump into our top 6 here. Nathaniel Dell out of Houston, a name that might not look for everybody like it belongs in this top 6, but trust me, it does. Number 5, Jordan Addison out of USC. Number 4, Cedric Tillman out of the University of Tennessee. Number 3, A.T. Perry from Wake Forest. Number 2, Xavier Worthy out of Texas. And number 1, Jackson Smith-Njigba from Ohio State. So many directions to go in here, John. Where should we start?
I'm going to start with Jordan Addison because I know he's the reigning Biletnikoff Trophy winner. And he's going to a Lincoln Riley offense. But my friends, other than CeeDee Lamb, and even look at CeeDee Lamb's numbers. His numbers were very good, but they weren't off the charts, 1,700 receiving yards, 16 touchdowns. Lincoln Riley spreads the ball around. USC has talent at the wide receiver position. Plus, they have a dual threat quarterback, Matt. Caleb Williams is going to take touchdowns in the red zone. Jordan Addison's a great talent. He's unbelievable. He's my number 3 Devy wide receiver. I love Jordan Addison. I don't think his ceiling is as high as last year with Kenny Pickett.
Agreed.
Kenny Pickett would just scramble, Matt, and literally they must have had a code or they had, a scramble drill, and Addison would just go deep. And Kenny Pickett hit him so many times on those deep crossing routes where he just separated from the safety or the cornerback. I don't think that's going to happen because Caleb Williams is inclined to take the 30-yard gain right there. Now, he'll get some home runs, don't get me wrong, because Lincoln Riley will scheme for him. But he also has Mario Williams, who's also, it's Mario Williams, I believe. I want to make sure I have the right one. He's also a good receiver coming from Oklahoma. Plus, we know USC has talent at the wide receiver position. I just don't see the ceiling there. That's why he's at number 5. The player I've fallen in love with over this offseason, I just moved him way up my Devy rankings, Cedric Tillman, Tennessee.
There you go.
Everyone who's listening to me and Matt, we are SEC biased. I think with good reason. I think it's pretty fair if you're going to miss. I'll miss on an SEC wide receiver. Tillman did everything you wanted last year for the first 1,000-yard receiver for the Volunteers since 2012. 72 passes for 1,205 yards and 14 scores. Velus Jones just got drafted. People are making fun of it, but he did get drafted, Matt. And I think
as we told them.
Yep. Cedric Tillman's a better player than Velus Jones. I think this year, the second year in this Josh Heupel offense, oh my God, with Hendon Hooker, love Cedric Tillman here. And Matt, who are the 2 that you're looking at and identifying in this group?
Well, John, I referenced him at the start here. We have to talk about Nathaniel Dell out of Houston. Dell, just 5'10", 155. He is getting NFL draft buzz. So kind of the next in line there of your Tutu Atwells, or I'm forgetting the small wide receiver from this year's past draft class, Calvin Austin, right? Nathaniel Dell in 14 games last year had 90 receptions for 1,329 yards, 12 touchdowns. And guess what? Everything's the same. He's coming back. Clayton Tune is coming back. If nothing, Tune missed a huge chunk of last season, right? With injury. He was on the field, off the field. So if anything, he'll have more stability. Houston's building momentum as this year's potential Cincinnati, right? This group of 5 team that could challenge and push forward. A group of 5 for one more season, we now know Houston will be. So let's soak in that Houston schedule while we can, and let's get every drop of fantasy content out of it before we have to adjust to what could be an even new Big 12, right? As we're hearing reports early this week. The other guy, John, that we have to talk about for 2 reasons. One, he's the cover image on our YouTube video, so we have to talk about him. But number 2, I can't talk enough about the ridiculous true freshman season from Xavier Worthy out of Texas. John, 62 receptions, 981 yards, and 12 touchdowns in a horrid passing attack, right? I mean, you had Hudson Card on the field. You had the other player who's Casey Thompson. Who just, they were rotating on and off the field because nobody could win that job all season. Well, now you have Quinn Ewers. And yes, I don't care. Quinn Ewers is the week 1 starter in my mind until proven otherwise. In a Steve Sarkisian offense, right? And so once these pieces click, they may not click right away, but remember, Texas is going to have an easier early season schedule. Once these pieces click, it's going to be ridiculous. And Xavier Worthy has proven that even when the pieces aren't clicking, that he's effective. Imagine when they're clicking, John. Imagine when even if this Texas offense gets into full gear, right? I mean, we talk about this all the time in season, right? With CFF, DFS slates, right? There's game breakers every week that it doesn't matter if you don't have this player, you're not taking down the JPP. And that's going to be Xavier Worthy. I think he's going to be a weekly breaker, John, 3 or 4 times this season. And, it might not be every single week. I think he's going to put up a good week every single week, but there's going to be just some monster weeks from Xavier Worthy. And that's going to help you win CFF titles. John, some other guys that might help you win CFF titles. We've both identified 2 sleeper wide receivers here. You have Jaden Bray out of Oklahoma State and Isaiah Nayer out of Texas. So sticking with this Texas offense, John, why don't you tell us about Nayer and then break down Bray?
I want Texas. I want a piece of the Texas offense. Unfortunately, if you're going to get Bijan or Worthy, you're going to have to pay, top 6 draft capital. So you've got to have the ability to acquire him at the top of the draft. Quinn Ewers is coming at a nice value. I like him. But Matt, if you want an underrated piece of the Longhorns offense, which I also love this year, especially they got 6 new offensive linemen, folks. That line, it doesn't have to be top 10. It's just got to be better than bottom 20. If they get to the middle of the pack in Texas with that improved offensive line, the Longhorns are going to be nasty. Why do I want Isaiah Nayer? Matt, he's 6'3", 210. He is the perfect complement to Xavier Worthy, who's 6'1", 165, and he's just a speed demon. Nayer transfers in from Wyoming, Matt, and he comes in and gives them the big-bodied outside receiver that they covet in this offense. For a Cowboys team that was challenged to throw the ball down the field, I'm being kind, Isaiah Nayer last year had 44 receptions for 878 yards and 12 touchdowns. He now plays for the Longhorns. Matt, the reports out of spring practice were incredible for Nayer. If you can't get Worthy or Bijan Robinson, Nayer is the nice piece of this offense. You plug him in as your third receiver or in the flex. And Matt, when he goes off, you're golden. And he's still going to get targets in the middle of the field every week. I like Isaiah Nayer here. Jaden Bray. We've talked about it a lot, systems. Before last year, the Cowboys have been one of the best systems for wide receivers in the country, Matt. Last year wasn't so good. I still believe in this offensive passing attack. Spencer Sanders comes back. He might be in his 5th season. It seems like he's been there forever.
In
Matt.
his 15th season, yeah.
So he comes back. And why is that important to me? Jaden Bray is a true sophomore, Matt. He comes back and he should be their star receiver. He's 6'2", 200 pounds. That is like the idea Oklahoma State wide receiver size. They're all between 6 and 6'3". They're all between like 195 and 210. There's Jaden Bray. In that offense, he should be peppered with targets. And Matt, he is such a value in double-digit rounds. We're talking about a player who has the upside of a top 24 CFF wide receiver, but you're drafting him as your 4th or 5th wideout on your fantasy team. I love systems. Jaden Bray and Isaiah Nayer, also both Big 12 defensively challenged conference. I love both these young men.
All right. I'm going to identify, John, when I was putting together the list here, who my sleepers were going to be, I said, why don't I just identify somebody that I've actually just drafted, right? So I'm in the CFF site, Best Ball. I believe it's 11. I mean, they're doing a ton of them. They do such great work there over at the CFF site. And so I pulled up my draft here and I took Kenoda Mumfield in the, hold on, I want to make sure I get this right. I believe it was the 15th round. Just an absolute value here for me for Mumfield. Mumfield transferred from Akron to Pitt this offseason as a true freshman with Akron. 63 receptions, 751 yards, 8 touchdowns. Now, I know Kenny Pickett's gone, but Keaton Slovis is in. And we've talked about it's been a little bit of a roller coaster here, but I haven't given up on Keaton Slovis, right? When he's been healthy, he's done very well. All right. And he's going to step in and be the guy that's an experienced veteran quarterback here to help lead Mumfield on the field. We just talked about Jordan Addison, the leading receiver for Pitt, is gone to USC. So he's going to have the ability to step in and contribute right away. He's shown a big playability. He's shown explosiveness. I like the idea of Mumfield making a quick impact a lot. And then I went with another transfer, John, somebody who's flying a little bit more under the radar. But we talked about that surprisingly deep Maryland wide receiver core, right? And one of the guys that just could not consistently get targets was Brian Cobbs. But last year he had 25 receptions, 341 yards, 13.6 the catch. So he did well when he had it. He transferred to Utah State. And John, is there anything that will light up your eyes as a CFF analyst more than when somebody transfers from the Big Ten down to the Mountain West? Because you're saying,
That's
well,
nice.
you know the talent's there, right? And all of
Yeah.
a sudden, now you have opportunity and some help on the defensive side of the ball, right? Not as strong of defenses. So you get Utah State, which, doesn't jump out of your head as a powerhouse, but offensively, but Devin Tompkins off to the NFL, UDFA, 102 receptions, 1,700 yards as the lead guy for the Utah State Aggies last year, right? So Cobbs has the ability to come in, make that impact. You're getting them cheap. I mean, we're talking mid to late teens in your CFF drafts, right? You're not paying a lot for Brian Cobbs, but you could get a lot for Brian Cobbs. So 2 sleepers here, both transfer guys. But as always, we talk about this every single CFF preseason episode. Sleepers come in many forms in college fantasy football. And hopefully these 4 guys are an example of that. John, we want to finish up this show with the same way we finished up last show, talking about the charity that is the foundation here for the 2022 CFF Kings Classic, with which both me and John will be participating in this year. I'll let you go ahead and take it away.
My friends, someone last week was kind enough to make $1,000 donation to our charity.
Fantastic.
Unbelievable, Matt. We are now over 50% of our goal. We want to hopefully collect 2,500. We're at 2,780. Nothing that I do in the college fantasy football space, it's all free. I don't charge for anything on Fantrax, Rookie Big Board, ITL podcast. All that myself and Matt and anyone who works with me or anyone in the Kings Classic is asking, please make the smallest donation. Every $5 helps these young children and the families. It's also very hard on the families whose child has some disease. Unfortunately, that is very hard financially. And they are a great hospital. Go to the top of my feed at Gridiron Skull 91 on Twitter. Pinned to my feed is the link to make a small donation. The entire Kings Classic League would appreciate it very much. And we're hoping to get up to $2,500 to St. Jude's Children's Hospital by the time we have the draft August 13th, everyone.
All right, there we go. Our top 24 wide receivers plus some sleepers here for the 2022 college football season. As always, we appreciate you checking out this episode of the Rookie Big Board.